The fluorescent lights of the family court hallway hummed with a cold, clinical energy. My husband, Julian, walked toward the double doors wearing a custom Italian suit, his posture radiating the untouchable confidence of a man who believed his own myth. He didn't just walk. He glided, flanked by a lead partner from the city's most ruthless asset protection firm. As they passed the wooden bench where I sat with my attorney, Julian leaned down just enough so his expensive cologne filled my space. "Take a good look around, Clara," he murmured, his voice laced with smooth contempt. "This is the room where you realize you're walking away with exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing." Standing just a few feet behind him was Vivian, his lead interior designer and the woman whose name I had spent the last 3 months finding on five-star boutique hotel invoices. She adjusted her designer sunglasses, gave me a sugary, dismissive smirk, and whispered loudly enough to echo off the marble walls. "Some people just don't know when they've outlived their usefulness." I didn't react. I didn't let my hands shake, and I didn't look up to meet their eyes. Instead, I quietly tapped the black leather portfolio resting on my lap. Inside was a single heavy cream envelope. I slid it across the table to my legal counsel, Marcus. "When the judge asks for our initial statement," I whispered calmly, "hand him this first." To understand how a woman who spent 15 years pouring her soul into a family legacy could sit so silently while her life was stripped away, you have to look past the luxury vehicles and the multi-million-dollar commercial catering empire Julian claimed he built with nothing but his own bare hands. We met in a cramped, drafty commercial kitchen when we were 24. Julian was a brilliant, chaotic chef with massive culinary ambitions and a credit score so damaged no commercial landlord would look at him. I was a licensed corporate compliance and logistics specialist with a steady salary, a flawless credit history, and a habit of looking at a chaotic spreadsheet and seeing a path to order. When we married, we signed an unspoken pact written in sweat and cheap coffee. I became the invisible foundation. For the first 6 years of Vanguard Hospitality, my salary paid our residential rent, our health insurance, and the grocery bills. But more importantly, when our primary distributor pulled our line of credit during a brutal winter downturn, I didn't let Julian close the doors. I walked into my credit union, took out a personal signature loan against my own signature, and quietly deposited $35,000 into the company's empty operating account so he could make payroll. I stopped taking my own career advancements. I stayed up until 2 a.m. auditing inventory spreadsheets, managing vendor contracts, and drafting corporate tax structures while Julian perfected his menus and charmed local restaurant critics. "One day, Clara," he used to say, burying his face in my neck after a 16-hour shift, "your name will be on the marquee right next to mine. Everything I build is yours." But wealth has a strange way of rewriting history in the minds of the insecure. By year 10, Vanguard Hospitality wasn't just a business. It was an institution. We moved from the drafty apartment to a sprawling estate in the hills. Julian started appearing on local television segments and business panels. He was the culinary maverick. Slowly, the pronouns in his vocabulary shifted from we to I. He stopped asking my opinion on expansion plans. When I pointed out that a new venue lease was dangerously overleveraged, he scoffed, barely looking up from his tablet. "Clara, you handle the spreadsheets and the paperwork. Leave the macro vision to the people who actually understand growth." Then came the hidden phone screens, the sudden changes in office door key codes, and the sudden influx of late-night site inspections with Vivian. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday evening, when I went to his corporate office to drop off a corrected tax filing. The door was cracked open. "The structural split is clean," Julian was telling someone over the phone, his voice cold and analytical. "The corporate entity is registered under a holding company she has no direct operational ties to. By the time the papers are served, her name won't touch a single asset. I'm not letting her bleed my company dry." My heart didn't break, it went cold. I walked out of the building, went home, and went straight to the attic where I kept our historical corporate records. When I met Marcus, my attorney, the next day, I laid down a series of color-coded binders. It wasn't just a folder. It was a flawless chronological forensic audit of Vanguard Hospitality's first decade. Every personal check I had written to cover corporate insurance, every email from Julian begging me to bail out the operating account, and the original signature loan documentation. "Clara," Marcus had said, flipping through the immaculate pages with a slow whistle. "Most spouses leave this to forensic accountants after the litigation starts. You've done the work for them." Now, inside the courtroom, the bailiff called the session to order. Judge Vance, a sharp-eyed jurist with decades of experience on the family bench, took his seat. Julian's high-priced counsel stood immediately, projecting an aura of absolute dominance. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of an aggressive claim on separate property. Vanguard Hospitality is entirely the product of Mr. Carter's personal vision, culinary talent, and independent branding. While Mrs. Carter was a supportive spouse at home, she held no equity and made no material contribution to the proprietary expansion of the commercial entity. We ask for a summary dismissal of her asset-sharing claims." Julian sat tall, crossing his arms, a ghost of a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. Judge Vance turned his gaze to Marcus. "The defense." Marcus stood calmly, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, we agree that the facts should dictate the outcome. Instead of an oral argument, we submit this direct chronological summary of material financial dependency, backed by verified historical discovery." The bailiff took my cream envelope and handed it to the bench. The courtroom fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Julian chuckled softly under his breath, leaning over to whisper something to his lawyer. Vivian leaned forward from the gallery, a look of pure amusement on her face. They expected an emotional, desperate plea from a discarded wife. Instead, Judge Vance opened the envelope. He adjusted his reading glasses. The document wasn't a letter of heartbreak. It was a cold, hard ledger of sacrifice. January 2014. Clara Carter secures a personal signature loan of $35,000, deposited directly into Vanguard Operating ACCT number 4021 to prevent insolvency. Corporate bank receipt attached. June 2015. Clara Carter waives her personal corporate relocation package, diverting $18,000 in household funds to secure the lease on the primary commercial kitchen. November 2016. Email correspondence from Julian Carter. "If you don't cover the vendor insurance from your personal account this morning, we lose the city contract. I will make sure you get every dime back when we hit it big." The judge's eyes traveled down the pages. The amusement on Julian's side of the table began to curdle. Judge Vance stopped, flipped back to a previous page, and then reached for the official corporate financial disclosure submitted under oath by Julian's legal team. He compared the dates. He looked at the signature loan records. Then he looked over the rim of his glasses directly at Julian. "Mr. Carter," Judge Vance said, his voice dropping an octave, "you stated in your sworn financial disclosure that Vanguard Hospitality was entirely self-sustaining and funded solely through independent corporate credit lines from its inception. Is that your testimony?" Julian cleared his throat, his posture stiffening. "Yes, Your Honor. To the best of my recollection, my vision was." "I am not asking about your vision, Mr. Carter," Judge Vance interrupted sharply. "I am asking about this $35,000 cash injection on January 14, 2014. The corporate ledger you submitted lists this as miscellaneous unclassified revenue. However, Mrs. Carter's personal bank records show an identical withdrawal, matched with a wire transfer confirmation code directly into your primary operating account. Furthermore, I have a printed email from your corporate address on that exact date thanking her for saving the company from collapse." Julian's attorney froze. He grabbed the document from the clerk, his eyes widening as he read his own client's written words. And it appears this pattern continues for 48 months, Judge Vance continued, his voice ringing through the silent room. While you were building your brand, your spouse was single-handedly absorbing your operational liabilities and shielding your company from bankruptcy using her personal credit. This isn't separate property, counselor. This is a deeply integrated joint economic venture. Julian's face flushed a deep, panicked crimson. He turned sharply to his attorney, but the lawyer was already furiously scribbling notes. His confident demeanor entirely vanished. In the gallery behind them, Vivian's smirk had completely evaporated. She sat frozen, staring at the floor. I am halting these proceedings, Judge Vance announced, slamming his pen onto the desk. This court will not accept a financial disclosure that borderlines on perjury. I am ordering a full court-appointed forensic accounting audit of Vanguard Hospitality from day one. We will reconvene in 4 weeks to discuss a proper structural division. The gavel struck. When we returned a month later, the arrogance was entirely gone. The forensic audit had unraveled everything, forcing Julian's team to negotiate a massive, equitable settlement to avoid a formal referral for corporate tax non-disclosure. As the final papers were signed, Julian's high-priced legal team packed their bags and walked out, leaving him sitting alone at the defense table. Vivian hadn't even shown up to the building. I stood up, closing my leather portfolio. As I turned to leave, Julian spoke. Clara. His voice was hoarse, stripped of all its theatrical bravado. I convinced myself that because I was the one in front of the cameras, I was the only one who mattered. I didn't want to admit how terrified I was that without your structure, I was just a chaotic chef who couldn't keep the lights on. I looked at him, feeling no anger, no vindictive joy, only a profound sense of closure. I didn't build that company to compete with you, Julian, I said softly. I built it because I loved you. But you forgot that the roots of a tree matter just as much as the fruit. I walked out of that courtroom into the bright afternoon sun. I didn't spend my settlement on luxury items or symbolic vacations. Instead, I leased a beautiful sunlit office suite downtown and hung a polished brass sign on the door. Clara Carter Corporate Structural and Scaling Consultants. My very first client was a young, brilliant artisan baker who had incredible talent, but no idea how to manage a balance sheet or protect her personal assets. As I sat across from her, mapping out her financial future, I smiled. I wasn't the invisible foundation anymore. I was building my own house,